Welcome to another edition of the MDM podcast. I'm Mike Hockett, MDM's executive editor. Established in 2011, Kodiak Building Partners is a very young company by standards in wholesale distribution. But in just 12 years, the building products distributor has rapidly scaled to the number 11 spot on MDM's 2023 Top Building Materials and Construction Supplies Distributors list, having acquired over 100 locations in 25 states during that time, and it now has over 6,000 employees. My guest in this podcast episode is Kodiak CEO Steve Swinney, who founded the company out of what he called an opportunity coming out of the Great Recession. Our discussion centered on Kodiak's decentralized growth model, which emphasizes local empowerment and autonomy. Swinney says that's been the key that's enabled Kodiak to find, acquire, and integrate distributors at such a rapid pace. We also touched on Kodiak's culture and what the distributor has been up to on the technology side. Enjoy. Steve, thanks for joining the MDM podcast.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Kodiak Building Partners has been on MDM's top building materials and construction supplies distributors list for a number of years now, but it's still a young company by market standards at only about a dozen years old. So can you take me through the inception and launch of Kodiak, which, from my understanding, was seen as an opportunity coming out of the Great Recession of 2008, 2009?
Sure. So, just to kind of go back to the beginning, myself and three other guys that were part of the forming team here at Kodiak, we're all in this industry at ProBuild Holdings, 2007 to 2011. We left there in 2011 and launched Kodiak. And, we had some history in the industry. But certainly, it was a tough time in the industry going through the Great Recession there. And really, for me, prior to ProBuild, I'd really come up through the accounting and then finance world mostly at various more retail-oriented distribution roles in different companies in the past. But so, you talked about a kind of opportunity, and yeah, I think there were two really fundamental things about the formation of Kodiak that were essential for us. And one was that opportunity. I'd heard, all the way back when I was in college, this speaker that talked about really looking for disruptive and transformative events, and then betting big. He was an entrepreneur, and so betting big on those. And so for us, we'd gone through the Great Recession at ProBuild. We'd seen, such a, kind of once in a lifetime impact on our industry. And for us, as 2011 approached, we really saw what we thought was going to be a very long recovery in the industry and just really a lot of runway. And so taking advantage of that opportunity and saying this is a great time to invest and build a business in this space was one key factor. And I think the second one that was equally important was, ProBuild was consolidating the industry just like Kodiak's trying to do, and just like there's other players out there that are doing that. And so I think that second piece for us was we really had this idea about doing that consolidation and growth strategy in a different way. And that really speaks to culture and strategy. And so, for us, having a culture that was very locally led and much more decentralized was an important factor. Being a company that was very diversified in different parts of the building product distribution space was important. And then really looking at geographies that we thought were going to benefit over a very extended period of time from demographic shifts, migration shifts within the United States. All those were kind of the building blocks of our strategy as we launched in 2011.
And you guys were able to scale pretty quickly. M&A is a key market factor in all distribution verticals, but consolidation seems to be especially prevalent in building materials and construction supply. And as one of the most active companies involved there, what is it like to be constantly prospecting, evaluating, and then pursuing acquisitions in a market where I'm sure your competitors are also targeting some of the same acquisition candidates that you are?
Sure. Yeah. And it definitely is. It's, if you look at the space, it's still so fragmented, but there is a ton of activity going on. And so certainly we all kind of run into each other, in some of these deals for sure. As far as what it's like, I absolutely love it. It's one of my favorite things about Kodiak, and I'd kind of come up. I mentioned earlier, I'd come up through the finance side and had done a lot of M&A activity as a finance guy at previous companies. And so I love it. It's the opportunity to meet so many great entrepreneurs and great business people. The things you learn from getting exposed to so many different companies, not only the ones you ultimately get to partner with and acquire, but there's obviously a ton of people you talk to that the deal doesn't come together. You still learn so much from seeing all these successful businesses and successful leaders. And then I think the other thing that's super exciting for us when we get to the other side of the deal is really that opportunity to get better through collaboration with them, for them to benefit the rest of our business, as well as us adding some value, hopefully, in what they do. All of those things for me make it just incredibly dynamic and fascinating to be in a very acquisitive based organization that's also trying to really grow an operation and drive value through the day to day. But having both elements of that has been incredibly fun for all of us over the last 12 years.
We at MDM write a lot about M&A integration best practices. And I always wonder how those companies that are very active expanding that way manage all those constantly moving pieces, whether it's on the operation side or the people and culture side. Because I assume it's very different if you're making one acquisition every other year compared to a company that's making a half dozen or more deals per year. So with Kodiak acquiring over 100 locations and now standing as one of Colorado's largest employers with more than 6,000 employees, what has enabled Kodiak to expand in a sustainable way?
I think it really comes down very, very much to our culture. I don't know how we've done almost 40 deals now over the last 12 years. We're in about 25 states, and without the culture that we've really built and been able to maintain through that growth, I don't think it would have been sustainable at all.
And further on that, the Kodiak website has a page dedicated to its culture and the different things that the company does to support its employees and help them grow. So as best you can you walk me through a few of Kodiak's culture elements and what the company is doing to foster an environment that really attracts new talent and maintains that stickiness that everyone's looking for current staff?
Well, sure. And that's so tough because, right, the labor market is incredibly challenging for all of us. Great people are really hard to find and they're hard to retain. And we've been really blessed and fortunate in that regard. As far as our culture, I think the first thing I'd touch on, and we talk about it a lot, is locally led, or maybe we'll use the word decentralized. I think locally led is probably the better way to articulate the way we try to do this. And I think what's important about that is it would be easy for us to make it sound like it's just kind of a free-for-all here and everyone's just off doing their own thing. And I don't think that would work for us if that was the case. I think for us, locally led is really about empowering your people to make decisions and to serve their customers and take care of their employees and to create value. And so locally led is about making decisions as close to the customer and as close to the employee as possible. And then, the second thing is equally important to kind of keep things in balance is collaboration, which I think I also mentioned a few minutes ago. We really strive to have an incredibly collaborative culture, which means, we want you out there making decisions, but we also want you interacting with each other in the organization because we all know that, our ideas are going to get better and better when we're all working on them together than if we're all working in a vacuum. And so, we try to pair that locally led, very autonomous with a very collaborative culture that's exchanging ideas and talking a lot. And then I think the third leg of that stool is humility. This is an organization where I would say the two biggest reasons someone doesn't work out in our culture is if they're not humble and if they're not collaborative. And so that humility piece, I think, is really important because we partner with a bunch of great businesses and great leaders. We're not out there doing turnarounds most of the time. And so the companies we acquire have been very successful in their own right. And so they bring a ton of great ideas. They also then are getting to partner with a bunch of great operators as well, who are going to give them some good ideas. And I think that humility piece is what allows you to be a great leader and be very successful, very confident in what you do. and at the same time, be willing to learn from someone else because you have the attitude that, look, I don't know it all. I think the next one I'd talk about, maybe the last one I'd mention right now is being driven. We've got a very driven culture. So, even though our businesses have been very successful, it's very common for us that an entrepreneur that has been running their business and sells to us, they don't just head out to the golf course and hang it up. They actually join us a lot of times with an intent to continue growing in their own roles and their own careers. And so we tend to have an organization of people that is really ambitious and really wants to accomplish some things. And so we've been able to kind of blend all that together and keep adapting into how we see those core values really play out over the years. And then I think the last thing is with culture, I think the communication of it is so critical. As we've grown, it's gotten a lot more challenging for us to really make sure, how do we reinforce that, with people? And it tends to be, as you mentioned, how, the 6,000 employees, we've got to do so much more to communicate what our core values are, what matters to us, why we do what we do. And so even, we just moved into a new corporate office here. And even things like this, we've tried to design the space that we're in to really reflect the core values that we have. That's another mode of communicating, hey, this is what we're about. This is how we're going to do things. And I think that's so critical as you grow, because it's just much more challenging to make sure we're all on the same page every day when we get up and go to work.
You were included in the Denver Business Journal's 2023 class of Most Admired CEOs, which was announced October 2nd. And I believe the award ceremony, is it being held later today in Denver?
It's actually this evening. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and additionally, the National Lumber and Building Materials, the National Lumber and Building Material Dealers Association, in partnership with HBS Dealer, named Kodiak as its 2023 Pro Dealer of the Year, which is also a great honor. And I know distribution executives don't get into this career field for the awards and the accolades there, but they certainly are nice to have. So what do you think that these two awards that I just covered say about what you and the Kodiak team have done there?
Yeah, they're definitely a huge honor, both of them. And it's, to have both those things happen in the same year has been really, really neat for us. I think what I would say it says more than anything that I'm proud of for our team and for our organization is that both of those recognitions are really about so much more than just the growth. They're about so much more than just profit. When you go through those interviews and the conversation, the evaluations, there's so much about your culture. There's so much about, how people feel about working there. There's so much about what you're doing in the community and how you're engaging beyond just generating profits. And I think that's the thing I'm most proud of, is that we have had a lot of financial success, a lot of business success in this venture, but we've continued to be known as an organization that I would say are good stewards of that. And part of that for us is being active in our community, is trying to create an environment where our employees can succeed and, they can achieve their dreams, they can take care of their families, where we're taking care of our customers and creating value for them. We've got a great partnership with our vendor community, and we've got investors that are happy, kind of being able to succeed in those different realms. A kind of more holistic view of success, I think, is what makes us most proud about these recognitions, is that they really do reflect kind of that whole broad view of what success really means in life.
You already covered this pretty well, but to grow and scale like Kodiak has via frequent acquisition, it certainly takes a lot of empowerment for those local companies to enable them to continue operating the way that they know is successful as part of the now greater organization. So can you anything else you can speak to that element of providing autonomy to Kodiak's operating leaders to do what they do best, and just how you guys have gone about doing that?
Sure. Yeah, I think, first of all, I had to define kind of our leaders, because we tend to apply this to our operating leaders, but it's really everyone. I really I've read this one description of what a leader actually is, and it's, one person defines as really just a person of influence, which we all are that. We all influence, the teams and the environments we're in. Sometimes we influence them for the better, sometimes we influence them for the worse. But to me, that's what leadership is. And so one of the things I've talked to some of our, like when we've been doing training for younger employees in particular, is that you don't have to get to this certain level or title to be a leader. You're going to lead and influence the teams and the work around you every day. And so when we talk about autonomy for our leaders, I think what's been so critical for us in terms of our growth is really trusting our people to do their jobs, to make good decisions, to create value and to do it in a way that aligns with our company's values. I don't think we could do all the growth and all the acquisitions and everything else that we've done without having a lot of trust in our culture and our people to take that lead. There's just too much work to go around if I've got to make all the decisions, or the senior leadership team here. We've got to really trust and encourage and develop the people throughout our organization. And it really actually comes back to, if you go back to our vision statement for our company, it doesn't really have anything to do with building products or distribution of any kind. It's our vision statement is to be a company that's creating a culture that empowers local leaders to succeed in the communities they serve. Yeah. And so it's like I talked about earlier, it's this very holistic definition of, hey, we're going to be successful if we encourage a culture that allows people to be successful in this organization. And so then that becomes necessary to trust them to really drive that value, to make those decisions and have that success locally, whether it's out in our operations across the country or whether it's right here in our office and it's the accounting team or the marketing team or finance or whatever it may be. I think that empowerment and that trust in our team is a critical aspect of our growth.
As of this recording in mid-November, Kodiak's most recent acquisition, which was of Don's Appliance, which has about a dozen locations in Western Pennsylvania and West Virginia, was particularly interesting in that looks like a diversification move as an extension outside of Kodiak's core building materials markets and into the appliance market. So can you take me through what was the motivation behind that deal and if we can expect further diversification from Kodiak in the near future?
Sure. So, it's actually an area that we have participated in for some time now, but it definitely doesn't get as much attention as particularly our lumberyard acquisitions and truss plants. But I talked about at the outset about this diversification idea, and diversification was a really important part of our strategy as we launched Kodiak. We'd been at ProBuild. It was a business that was very focused on single family production home builders, which is a great market, great customers. We love that business, and we're in it significantly today. But we all know the construction world is pretty cyclical and can be pretty volatile. And as we built Kodiak, we really wanted to have a more diverse business. We knew we couldn't escape cyclicality, but we could do things to diminish the impact of it. And so one of the ways we set about doing that was to be in different parts of building product distribution, and hopefully just have this imperfect correlation, between their cycles. And so lumberyards and the truss business and all that is definitely our biggest segment. But then we also operate in construction supplies, which is more of the foundation part of the construction. So it's rebar and concrete accessories. And we have a drywall division that's really at a different stage of the building process. And then this appliance world, we call it interiors, Kodiak Interiors Group internally, is kind of at the very end of particularly the home construction. So it's the last thing that's really happening before that closes and that new homeowner steps into that home. And so we've actually got Don's is our fourth company in that space. We operate factory builder stores down in Texas, especially appliance here in the Colorado market, and then Arizona Appliance and Home down in the Arizona market. We love this space, and we've had to learn a little bit more about it. It wasn't something that was in our background, but it just like lumber and some of these other categories is very fragmented. Some great family-owned businesses across the country that have really built up in that industry. But it's an opportunity for consolidation. And so very long answer to your question, but will you see more of that from us? Yes, absolutely. We think it's a great opportunity and great area to expand. We've got a fantastic leadership team internally, and we think it's an area where we can really grow and continue to do some of the things successfully we've done from a consolidation standpoint in that space over the next several years.
Well, I'll definitely keep my eye out for that. And I'm always curious to ask distribution executives what their company has been up to on the technology side and in their digital transformation journey. So are there any recent projects or initiatives on that front out of Kodiak that you can touch on?
Yeah, so I think we always really think about technology in our business not necessarily as this transform is going to change everything about what we do, but we do think about it as an incredibly critical enabler of better business processes and success in our business. We talked a few minutes ago, a little earlier, about labor challenges, and we don't think that's going away, not only for our customers out in the field or for our own business. We think we're going to have a very challenging labor market for the foreseeable future. And so we really think about technology as how do we use that tool to enable business transformation, business process transformation. How do we use it to think about, in essence, remaking our back office? We have an initiative really kind of labeled back office transformation here that's relying heavily on technology tools to really take a fresh look at, okay, we've got all these companies all over the country. We've got this corporate office here. When you're in a smaller company, you still got to do all those things on the ground locally. So as we all come together, how do we reimagine what the back office should look like for supporting our operations and our sales focuses in the business? And I think technology, I think AI is something that we have been using selectively to start reimagining how we handle payables and how we handle credit and collections and things like that. So for us, it's going to be looking at these tools and how do they really enable our people to be more successful at what they do and more streamlined at what they do, so they can really focus on the big issues and let the technology, really do the nitty gritty, the less exciting and the less thoughtful work, get done for them.
All right. And then taking a macro look at the economic state of the building supply sector, looking at, Q3 earnings reports from a lot of publicly traded distributors, manufacturers, things certainly look challenging out there in terms of demand, and especially in the residential housing market. So it seems like it has been a tough year in 2023 for building material suppliers on that front. And I'm curious to get what your outlook is for 2024 and kind of what the consensus you're seeing is. Do you expect another pretty challenging year for business conditions?
Yeah, 2023 has been challenging. It's been kind of a correction year. I'd say after, a quite dynamic couple of years coming out of COVID. But, I think our outlook for 2024 is that it's going to be relatively stable from where we're at right now. I think there's probably some signs of a little bit of volume growth, but we definitely are still seeing, kind of correction in lumber prices in particular. And so I think on balance, we're looking at 2024 to look a lot like 2023 from a top line and a profitability perspective. What we're really excited about is the long term. One of the dynamics that we way underestimated back in 2011 was just how big a shortage of, in particular, single family housing there was, and how long that would persist. And so as we sit here 12 years in, we feel like, the next 5 to 10 years are going to present a time period where there is a lot of fundamental demand for housing growth, and then that obviously ripples through to light commercial and other categories as well. We think there's a great long-term runway. And I think the big challenge is affordability, and affordability really being a function of mortgage rates, also being a function of local permitting and development hoops that you got to jump through. Those are the big things that I think are challenging the long term, is how do we build homes more efficiently and effectively, and how do we build them more affordably for people. But the demand is out there, we think, for the foreseeable future, where we've got a lot of housing shortage to really work through. over the next several years. And so for us, that's a really good underlying demand trend. And it means for us, we think we've got a really stable to growing market to deal with over the next decade.
Thanks for that perspective. Well, that's all I have here in terms of our planned questions. But before we sign off, do you have any final thoughts or anything you want to share about Kodiak Building Partners or the building materials market in general?
Maybe this is a good wrap-up point and just something that I think has been so much fun for us over the last decade or 12 years, and hopefully will be for a long time to come, is, one of the things that attracted us to this space, to stay in it even after, going through the Great Recession, as really our introduction to it, was I found the cultures and the people in this industry to just be incredible. And I think that's a true statement of just this broader distribution world. The roots of our industry are so fantastic, with all these family-owned businesses that have really strived over generations to build great companies that impacted their communities and that took care of their people. And so we were really attracted to that. We wanted to stay in the industry, and I'd mentioned, at the outset, wanting to do this a little differently, this whole consolidation thing a little differently. And so for us, one of those things is kind of been approaching our industry with more of a stewardship mentality. And so, we don't acquire companies so we can make them like Kodiak and put our own stamp on it and do it our way. We really do kind of approach acquisitions from more of a standpoint of, hey, you've got a great business, your family's built this fantastic legacy, you're entering this transaction for whatever reason because, that ownership piece isn't going to continue into the next generation. But we want to honor the legacy. We want to honor what you've created, and we want to be the stewards of that continued growth story and success story into future generations. And I think for us, it's been a really exciting thing to be able to just step into that stewardship role and really be trusted with the legacies of great companies that have really helped literally build the communities around America. And we're just excited about continuing that journey over the next decade.
That's a great point to end on. Well, Steve, thank you once again for joining the MDM podcast.
Thank you so much. Enjoyed visiting with you.